Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. Thanks for your service. General Walters, let me start with you. Secretary Austin has reaffirmed the position of the prior administration that China is our pacing threat. Given that, what's your view on what you can do in EUCOM to free up military resources that the department can use in the pacing theater?
Senator, my first response is what we do to effectively compete and deter against the nearest peer competitor in Europe, Russia, is effective in deterring China because of the connectivity between the two nations and the willingness of both nations to engage in malign influence against the United States and against NATO. So those activities that allow us to continue to be successful in the competition phase against Russia are also helpful against China. Whether it's pointing out the poor path that a nation can take with respect to Huawei 5G, or whether it's pointing out what China is doing with respect to equities and seaports and aerial ports investment in Europe.
Let me ask you a little bit about NATO. There's been a lot of talk about NATO's role in helping confront China. Wouldn't it be helpful if our European allies did more to bear the burden of confronting Russia so that we can focus on what has been identified as our pacing threat, the pacing theater?
No argument here, Senator, and I'm pleased to report the nations are. They're very fixated on Russia. There's no hesitancy on their part, and I say that as a result of producing the first NATO military strategy in over 6 decades, finalizing the concept for deterrence and defense of the Euro-Atlantic area. All of those codify the challenges that we face against a malign Russia, and the nations have been very willing to produce national plans that take into account Russia as a malign influencer in the region.
Let me just ask you about our NATO allies' spending. In 2014, I think it was, the NATO members agreed to spend 2% of their GDP, respective GDPs, on defense by 2024. Now, the world has changed a lot since 2014, and particularly with our own assessment of what is now our pacing threat. From a military standpoint, and given the changed security environment, do you think that 2% is still the right target?
I do, Senator. I will tell you that from 2016 to 2020, the 10 nations today that meet the 2% minimum, all the nations involved have allowed us the opportunity to get our hands on $130 billion extra dollars, and that makes a big difference with our ability to effectively compete.
Has EUCOM done any analysis as to that 2% number, why you think that's still the 2%, that's still the right number?
Sir, EUCOM has done analysis, OSD has done analysis, and NATO has conducted analysis, and the feedback we get is the Wales pledge of 2% is still viable with respect to our ability to build a competitive edge against near-peer competition in Europe.
Would you be willing to share that analysis, General, in the appropriate setting with this committee?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Let me just ask you, before I move to General Lyons, about ISR. You mentioned in your opening statement that timely indications and warning would be key for deterring or blunting any Russian attack in the Baltics. Of course, ISR is a very scarce commodity. Our forces in the Pacific also need timely indications and warnings of possible Chinese attacks there, particularly with regard to Taiwan. So my question is, how do we minimize the amount of American ISR that's needed in your AOR so that we can monitor Russian forces effectively, but also continue to bolster our deterrent posture in PACOM?
Continue to communicate to our allies and partners the criticality of ISR and what it contributes in indications and warnings and what it affords you the opportunity to do in the competition phase before you get to crisis or before you get to conflict. And in NATO, we're having success with that.
Very good. Thank you, the General. General Lyons, in my remaining seconds here, let me ask you a logistics question. Admiral Davidson has recently warned that China might attempt a fait accompli with regard to Taiwan much sooner than we might otherwise previously have anticipated. Just from a logistics standpoint, what do we need to do? What do we need to have in place in the Indo-Pacific in order to blunt such an offensive as quickly as possible, in your view?
Well, Senator, I think, Admiral Davidson's done some great work out there. It still has to continue in terms of the posture, not just in the Pacific, but the global posture. So it's so critical that we think of things globally and not just Indo-Pacific. And our global posture that offers us a physical, a temporal, and a psychological advantage to be able to come when we're told to come. And I have a high degree of confidence we can do that. I know that there's still work to be done as we evolve and look at the future character of warfare. But I think we're on the right path to support Admiral Davidson's initiatives.
Very good. My time has expired. I'll have another question or two for you for the record. Thank you both, gentlemen,
Thanks,
for your service. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Senator.